In the concrete heart of El Salvador's most feared prison, something ancient and terrifying still speaks. Even when the men are stripped naked, even when their names are taken, even when the lights never turn off, their skin keeps talking. These are the secret tattoos of the prisoners at CECOT, the hidden language of MS-13 and Barrio XVIII. A language written in blood, ink and violence. A language that once ruled a nation, and now sits silently behind bars, waiting for someone to read it. This is the story of how tattoos became both the badge of honor and the death sentence for thousands of the most dangerous men in the Western Hemisphere. Welcome to the hidden world inside CECOT. When Nayib Bukele's forces stormed the neighborhoods in 2022, they didn't just arrest gang members. They arrested walking books of criminal history. Every tattoo on these men tells a story. Every line, every symbol, every number carries decades of pain, power, and death. And in CECOT, the terrorism confinement center, those stories are no longer whispered in the streets. They are locked away. But they still speak. Let's read them. The history of these tattoos begins far from El Salvador in the brutal streets of 1980s Los Angeles. When Salvadoran refugees fled the Civil War, many of their teenage sons ended up in the most dangerous neighborhoods of LA. There they formed two rival gangs, Mara Salvatrucha MS-13 and Barrio XVIII. To survive, they needed to mark themselves, to prove loyalty, to warn enemies, to count their kills. The tattoo became their passport, their resume, their death warrant. A single teardrop under the eye? One murder. 3 teardrops? 3 murders. A clock with no hands? A life sentence. You will never leave this life alive. But in El Salvador, the tattoos evolved into something far more sophisticated. They became a complete secret language. The number 13 is everywhere. It stands for M, the 13th letter of the alphabet Mara. The number 18 is the rival. Barrio 18. Devil horns on the knuckles? Pure MS-13. The letters MS, or Salvatrucha, across the chest, across the back, across the forehead. These are the brands of the most committed soldiers. But the deeper you look, the darker the language becomes. A spider web on the elbow means the man has done serious time in prison. A clock on the neck with Roman numerals? The exact year he joined the gang. A Virgin Mary tattoo with specific colors? Protection for a particular clique. Some tattoos are so secret they are only known to high-ranking members. A small 13 hidden behind the ear. A tiny 18 inside the lower lip. A 3-dot triangle on the hand that looks innocent, until you know it means, mi vida loca, my crazy life. These are not decorations. They are contracts with death. When Bukele launched the state of exception in March 2022, the tattoos became evidence. Police no longer needed witnesses. They didn't need confessions. They had the skin itself. Thousands of young men were rounded up simply because their bodies told the story their mouths would never admit. In the first mass arrests, soldiers would line men up against walls, strip them to their underwear and photograph every inch of skin. The tattoos were catalogued like fingerprints. A man with MS-13 across his chest was no longer just a suspect. He was already convicted by his own body. And then they arrived at CECOT, the world's most infamous mega-prison. 40,000 capacity. Designed for one purpose, to make the gangs disappear. Inside those walls, the tattoos took on new meaning. For the first time in their lives, the men who once wore their tattoos with pride were forced to hide them. They cover their faces with their hands when cameras appear. They turn their backs to the walls. They sit in perfect silence, shoulder to shoulder, because every visible tattoo is now a confession. But the ink still speaks. The guards know exactly who they are looking at. A man with a full sleeve of MS-13 symbols? He's likely a veteran, possibly a palabrero, a word giver, a leader. A man with only 3 small dots on his hand? He might be a new recruit, or someone who was forced into the gang as a child. The tattoos tell the entire hierarchy. And in CECOT, that hierarchy has been shattered. The leaders who once controlled entire neighborhoods from inside other prisons now sit on cold concrete floors with the same men they used to command. Their tattoos, once symbols of power, have become symbols of defeat. Yet some still wear them with defiance. There are stories whispered by guards and leaked in rare videos of inmates who refuse to cover their tattoos. Men who stare straight into the security cameras, daring the world to see who they really are. These are the ones who still believe the gangs will rise again. But the numbers tell a different story. Since the crackdown began, homicides in El Salvador have fallen by over 95%. The extortion rackets that once choked the economy have almost vanished. Neighborhoods once controlled by tattooed gunmen are now safe for children to play in. The secret language that once ruled the country has been silenced inside concrete and steel. But the tattoos remain. They remain on the skin of over 90,000 imprisoned men. They remain as permanent reminders of a time when two gangs nearly destroyed an entire nation. And they remain as a warning. Because ink does not forget. Even when the men wearing it are locked away forever. Some tattoos are more personal than political. A mother's name across the chest. A child's birthday on the wrist. A cross for every funeral they attended or caused. These are the human stories hidden beneath the gang symbols. A man with MS-13 on his forehead and Te Amo Mama on his heart. A killer who still loves his mother. A murderer who still remembers his daughter's birthday. The tattoos don't just show what they did. They show who they were before the gang took everything. And who they can never be again. In the dim fluorescent light of CECOT, these men sit in silence. No more street corners. No more power. No more fear in the eyes of their victims. Only the quiet hum of the lights and the weight of their own skin. The secret language has been decoded. The hidden messages have been read. And the gangs that once spoke so loudly through their tattoos have been forced into the ultimate silence. This is the hidden truth of CECOT. Not just a prison, but a museum of living tattoos. A graveyard of gang culture. A place where the most violent men in Central America finally met a system more ruthless than they ever were. The tattoos are still there. But the power they once represented is gone. And in the end, perhaps that is the most terrifying message of all. The ink remains. But the men who wore it as kings now wear it as prisoners. Forever marked. Forever remembered. Forever contained. This is the secret language of the prisoners at CECOT. And this is how Nayib Bukele made sure that language would never be spoken on the streets again.